When you picture an interrogation, you probably imagine a rigid battle of wits, two people sitting across a metal table, locked in a high-stakes game of logical cause and effect, where every question is a calculated trap. Human beings naturally rely on this kind of predictability. When we face a barrage of questions, our brains immediately start looking for the pattern, allowing us to anticipate the interrogator's angle and build up our psychological defenses. But if you are dealing with a hardened subject, trained to resist standard questioning, dialing up the pressure or pointing out logical flaws often backfires. They know exactly how to brace for an attack that makes sense. To bypass those carefully built defenses, you have to stop playing the game entirely. You have to abandon logic and weaponize absolute absurdity. By stripping away the basic rules of human interaction, cause, effect, and sequence, you deny the subject the structural foundation they need to protect themselves, leaving them entirely exposed. This highly specific vulnerability is detailed in a declassified document called the KUBARK Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual. Within its pages, intelligence officers outlined a precise methodology for psychological disruption. They called it the confusion technique, though it's more famously known by its internal nickname, the Alice in Wonderland technique. The manual explicitly states the objective of this method. The goal is to confound the target's expectations, obliterate their familiar world, and, to quote the text directly, replace it with the weird. The nickname is literal. The interrogators try to replicate the surreal, unpredictable environment of Lewis Carroll's famous story, forcing the subject into a space where the standard laws of reality no longer apply. It turns nonsense from a mild annoyance into a highly calibrated psychological weapon. Executing this requires strict coordination. The technique relies entirely on two or more interrogators working tightly in tandem. The process begins when the first interrogator asks a question that sounds perfectly ordinary in delivery, but is entirely nonsensical in its content. Before the subject's brain can even attempt to parse that first sentence, the second interrogator violently interrupts with a completely unrelated, equally illogical demand. The questions keep coming, overlapping and colliding. Absolutely no coherent pattern or logical sequence is allowed to develop. To compound the disorientation, the interrogators drastically and unpredictably shift their voices, bouncing between a quiet whisper and a deafening shout. This coordinated assault denies the subject the basic cognitive building blocks required to string together a single, coherent thought. Initially, the human brain tries to fight back using its standard programming. The subject desperately searches for a hidden meaning, attempting to force a logical pattern onto the questioning where none exists. When that fails, the first line of defense is usually dismissal. The subject might laugh, assume it is an elaborate joke, or simply refuse to take the bizarre situation seriously. But as the relentless barrage continues, minute after minute, the sheer computational effort required to process the nonsense causes a cognitive short circuit. Without cause and effect to anchor them, the target experiences a profound, paralyzing mental fatigue. Their brain simply burns out. The mind's absolute inability to process sustained nonsense exhausts a person's willpower far faster than physical intimidation ever could. Eventually, the subject's structured mental world collapses entirely. The familiar patterns they rely on to navigate daily life are gone. They are left in a state of deep psychological destabilization, completely disoriented and highly vulnerable to outside influence. In this void of reason, an overwhelming, desperate need takes over. The subject simply wants the world to make sense again. They crave normalcy and predictability. Through the exhaustion, a realization sets in. There is only one clear action that might stop the surreal input and end the madness. They reach their breaking point, not out of a fear of punishment, but from a deep, innate intolerance for prolonged cognitive chaos. The subject begins to speak. They provide significant, factual admissions, handing over exactly what the interrogators are looking for. These secrets aren't extracted by force. They are willingly surrendered as a pure transaction, an exchange made solely to restore a reality that follows the rules. It reveals an unsettling truth about human nature. Our psychological resilience doesn't come entirely from within. It is heavily dependent on the external structure, logic, and predictability of the world around us. If you remove a person's ability to make sense of their environment, they will eagerly trade their deepest secrets just to get reality back. To extract the concrete truth, the intelligence community bypassed physical pressure entirely, relying instead on complete absurdity.